On July 19, 2005, 26-year-old Valerie Lagona, who was 9 months pregnant, was last seen at a private residence in the early morning hours. This final confirmed sighting marked the point after which no additional information about her movements is documented. Later that same day, her body would be found, but in this moment, the record ends, leaving only the official acknowledgement that nothing more is known about where she went after leaving the residence. Later on July 19, 2005, Valerie Lagona's badly beaten body was discovered at the Cristo Rey Cemetery in Kula, Texas. Investigators confirmed she had been indecently assaulted, severely beaten, and strangled, and that blunt force trauma to the head was identified as the cause of death. At the time she was found, she was 9 months pregnant with a son, adding to the gravity of the already devastating scene. Despite continuous efforts by county authorities, the investigation into Valerie Lagona's death stalled for many years. The case remained a priority for law enforcement, yet no viable leads emerged during this prolonged period. In 2018, the Texas Department of Public Safety offered a reward of up to $6,000 for information that could lead to an arrest. Unfortunately, despite this incentive, no tips or actionable information were received from the public. In August 2025, a major forensic breakthrough occurred in the investigation of Valerie Lagona's murder. Advanced DNA testing enabled investigators to finally link a suspect to the crime, providing the long-awaited lead in a case that had remained unresolved for years. The Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, and the Williamson County Sheriff's Office all played key roles in this critical development. In August 2025, investigators achieved a significant breakthrough in the cold case of Valerie Lagona. Advanced DNA testing allowed officials to conclusively link a suspect to the crime, providing a lead that had eluded authorities for years. The Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, and the Williamson County Sheriff's Office each contributed to the process, combining expertise to finally connect evidence to an individual. 66-year-old Saul Gonzalez was identified as the suspect in the murder of Valerie Lagona. He was arrested in Kula without incident and later indicted by a Lasalle County grand jury on August 29th. Gonzalez has been charged with capital slaying. Authorities confirmed that he and Valerie knew each other, although the exact nature of their relationship remains unclear. He is currently being held on a $1 million bond. In May 2020, skeletal remains were discovered in a wooded area on the 200 block of Overbrook Drive in South Knoxville, Tennessee, just south of the Tennessee River. Multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Knoxville Police Department, responded to the scene and secured the location before initiating a detailed assessment. The remains were subsequently transported to the Regional Forensic Center for examination by forensic specialists. This section presents the immediate findings, the surrounding environment, and the careful initial handling of the unidentified individual as investigators began their work. At the Regional Forensic Center, a forensic pathologist examined the skeletal remains and determined they belonged to a man estimated to be between 55 and 70 years old, standing 5 feet 5 inches to 5 feet 8 inches tall. The clothing found with him included windbreaker pants, dark dress pants, Wrangler jeans, a navy zip-up hoodie, and a remnant of a glove bearing a John Deere logo. A deteriorated wallet with degraded paper and a Big Lots logo was also recovered, but the cause and manner of death remained undetermined. Investigators compared numerous missing persons reports in an effort to identify the man, yet none of the entries aligned with the physical characteristics or items recovered with him. Despite continued work by law enforcement, no promising leads surfaced, and the investigation steadily lost momentum. With no identifiable evidence to guide further progress, the case eventually went cold. For years after the discovery, the case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, allowing investigators to pursue new scientific avenues. Forensic evidence was submitted to ARUM, where scientists developed a viable DNA extract and applied genome sequencing to assemble a comprehensive genetic profile of the unidentified man. Using this profile, ARUM's forensic genetic genealogy team conducted a detailed genealogical search that produced investigative leads returned to law enforcement. Follow-up work guided investigators toward potential relatives in Michigan and Kin S&P rapid relationship testing in August 2025 enabled direct comparison that moved the case forward. The investigation led to the confirmed identification of the man as Gerald John Forsman, originally from Livonia, Michigan, who had apparently been living in Knoxville before he disappeared. Relatives contacted by investigators stated that they had not seen him in 22 years. Records established that he was born on February 27, 1958, placing him at roughly 45 years old when he went missing. Funding provided through Congressman Tim Burchett made the forensic genealogical testing that enabled this identification possible. On March 30th, 1993, the body of 30-year-old Cher Herrera was discovered on the eastbound Hayfield Road on-ramp to Interstate 10 in Desert Center, Riverside County. A mother of 4 from Tulare County, she had last been seen alive several days before her remains were found. The remote Southern California desert surrounding the freeway emphasized the distance from her home and deepened the uncertainty about how she ended up there. Investigators began their early steps at the scene, yet the central question remained unanswered that day. Local authorities launched the initial investigation, but no suspects emerged despite their efforts to examine the circumstances surrounding the discovery. DNA technology was still developing in the early 1990s, limiting the forensic options available to investigators and restricting their ability to draw definitive connections. With no leads to pursue, the case eventually went cold. However, investigators had carefully collected, packaged, and sealed the evidence, preserving it in a way that later allowed the case to be reopened. In 2021, the Riverside County Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation into Cher Herrera's 1993 slaying after reviewing evidence that had been carefully preserved since the original crime scene processing. District Attorney Mike Hestron highlighted the diligence of investigators at the time, noting that every item had been properly collected, packaged, and stored. While Hestron did not specify which specific pieces of evidence facilitated the breakthrough, he confirmed that potential DNA recovered from Cher's case matched DNA collected from a separate 1992 crime scene in Texas. This match provided a significant lead that reignited the investigation. In May 2022, Texas Rangers arrested 68-year-old Douglas Thomas after DNA evidence linked him to the April 1992 Titus County case. Thomas had worked for more than 40 years as a long-haul truck driver, traveling extensively across the United States. Following his conviction in the Texas case, where he was sentenced to 40 years to life, investigators confirmed that his DNA also matched evidence recovered from Cher Herrera's 1993 investigation. The Riverside County Cold Case team traveled to Texas to interview Thomas, gathering information that led to the filing of charges against him for Cher's slaying, including a special circumstance allegation. The Riverside County District Attorney's Office secured custody of Douglas Thomas and arranged his transfer from Texas to California. Upon arrival, he was booked at the Robert Presley Detention Center on August 25, 2025. Thomas entered a not guilty plea on September 10th, formally responding to the charges related to Cher Herrera's slaying. His case is set to proceed with a felony settlement conference scheduled for December 3rd, representing the next step in the ongoing legal process and ensuring that the judicial proceedings continue under the supervision of Riverside County courts. On December 19, 1987, a 50-year-old female clerk at a Chevron gas station in Woodbridge, Virginia, was assaulted in the gas station's separate bathroom building. The assailant, armed with a knife, indecently assaulted her before placing duct tape over her mouth and nose, instructing her not to call for help for 5 minutes. She had stayed late to cover a co-worker's shift. After the attacker fled, police transported her to a hospital, collected physical evidence, and prepared an assault kit. Despite these efforts, no DNA matches or suspects were identified, and the case remained cold for decades. The case remained unsolved until 2019, when Prince William County detectives reopened the investigation. Physical evidence from the 1987 assault was resubmitted to the Virginia Department of Forensic Science for modern DNA testing, while part of the victim's underwear was sent to Marshall University Forensic Science Center for genetic genealogy analysis. Investigators did not identify a single match, but instead found two potential suspects: identical twins John Arthur Marubio of Deltona, Florida, and Russell Anthony Marubio of Palatka, Florida. This shared DNA profile required further testing to determine which twin was responsible for the crime. In August 2022, detectives turned to Parabon Nanolabs to resolve which twin was responsible for the 1987 assault. Scientists analyzed somatic mutations, genetic differences that arise after conception and accumulate throughout life, using deep whole genome sequencing and specialized bioinformatics analysis. Though uncommon in identical twins, these mutations provided unique markers distinguishing each brother. The forensic team compared the results to DNA recovered from the crime scene. This analysis conclusively identified 54-year-old Russell Marubio as the source of the DNA, ruling out his brother John, and marked a landmark use of NGS-derived evidence in United States courtroom. On August 21, 2025, a jury found Russell Marubio guilty of indecent assault and abduction after reviewing evidence that identified unique DNA mutations distinguishing him from his identical twin. The victim, now 88 and no longer living in Virginia, attended the court proceedings and expressed her gratitude to the detectives and laboratory teams whose work made the breakthrough possible. Marubio's sentencing is scheduled for November. This case represents the first time in the United States that DNA evidence from somatic mutations in identical twins directly resulted in a conviction. In February 2001, 41-year-old mother of three, Janet Jones Luxford, left her Florida home. She met Brian Jones, a truck driver, at a Jacksonville hotel where she worked. The two subsequently traveled together, arriving in Bessemer, Alabama. Janet never returned home, prompting one of her daughters to report her missing in 2002. Despite sustained efforts by investigators over the next 2 decades, no trace of Janet was ever found. The case grew cold, leaving her family to face 2 decades without closure or answers. 21 years after Janet vanished, the silence surrounding her cold case was finally broken by guilt. On March 27, 2022, the perpetrator, Brian Jones, took a bus from South Carolina to Alabama. Jones sat outside the Bessemer police station, visibly struggling to find the courage to turn himself in. He eventually walked inside and fully confessed to the crime. Lieutenant Christian Clemens noted that Jones appeared enormously remorseful and greatly relieved. Clemens described this profound event as a once-in-a-career type of situation. Jones, speaking to Bessemer police, revealed the context of the fatal incident. He confirmed he and Janet were romantically involved while he was working as a day laborer. The conflict that led to the violence began when Janet requested money to return to her parents in California. Jones claimed the argument quickly grew out of hand inside a motel located in the 1100 block of 9th Avenue Southwest in Bessemer. He confessed to striking Janet in the throat with a club during the heated exchange. Crucially, Jones insisted to the police that the subsequent demise of Janet was accidental. The day following his confession, on March 28, 2022, Brian Jones accompanied police investigators to the dumping location. This site was where he had left Janet's body back in 2001. Upon searching the area, authorities quickly discovered a green suitcase containing skeletal remains. The Jefferson County Coroner's Office utilized medical records alongside DNA evidence to conclusively confirm the identity of the remains as Janet Jones Luxford. A detective confirmed that this disappearance was not a case currently active on the investigators' radar until Jones's voluntary confession initiated the search. Following the discovery and identification of the remains, Brian Jones faced formal charges. In May 2022, he was officially charged with slaying and abuse of a corpse. Jones was subsequently transported to the Jefferson County Jail, where he was held under a high $765,000 bond. On October 7th, 2024, the case reached its conclusion when Jones pleaded guilty to ending Janet's life. This guilty plea was part of a specific deal where the charge of abuse of a corpse was ultimately dropped. Jones received a sentence of 21 years in state prison, symbolizing 1 year for every year Janet had been tragically missing since 2001. Janet's daughter, Amanda Luxford Fernandez, spoke about the profound impact of her mother's sudden disappearance. She stated that the uncertainty haunted her and her 2 siblings for over 2 decades. Fernandez shared that the family felt immense relief knowing that the only silver lining was confirmation her mother did not intentionally choose to stay away for 21 years. Expressing mixed emotions, she conveyed that the family was happy to be getting answers after the long search. Fernandez concluded with the powerful statement that they would also going to get some justice. In June 1985, the life of 40-year-old mother of 5, Ada Frances Sinfelder, ended abruptly inside her Winona, Minnesota apartment. The grim discovery began with a curious neighbor on the 500 block of East 4th Street. He and his wife had noticed Ada's television remained on all night, which they found highly unusual. Peering through the front room window, the neighbor observed the victim's body. She was visible, wedged between a bed and a wall in a room reportedly full of beds. After alerting a second neighbor, authorities were immediately contacted. The crime scene soon came alive with police officers and investigators. A Bureau of Criminal Apprehension team was urgently requested and began making its way to Winona. Hastily strung yellow ribbon secured the yard perimeter. As the investigation stretched late into the night, more than 100 people gathered along the sidewalks to observe the commotion. At that initial stage, the only statement police provided to the shocked Winona community was that Ada's cause of demise was not from natural causes. The morning after Ada's discovery, an autopsy revealed the brutal nature of the crime. She had sustained over 30 stab wounds, including a fatal wound to the heart, with injuries covering her face, neck, arms, and torso. Inside the home, investigators located a kitchen knife they suspected was the weapon, alongside blood smears on an internal door. Crucially, no signs of forced entry were detected. Investigators immediately focused on Ada's acquaintances, as family members insisted she had no known enemies. Details of her personal life were relevant. Her second husband was serving a 54-month prison sentence for criminal conduct. Her first husband was deceased. Ada's 5 children, aged 6 to 16, were all residing in foster homes. While she owned the crime scene apartment, Ada was reportedly living on and off with Clyde Dwayne Bobby Ford on Wilson Street, who was incarcerated for unrelated crimes at the time. Police followed numerous leads, questioned over 100 people, and even searched neighborhood garbage. Evidence found suggested multiple attackers were involved, but solid evidence remained elusive, leading the case to eventually grow cold. The origins of the violence began when Ada reported James Raymond Bolstad to the authorities for indecently assaulting her daughter in the summer of 1985. Bolstad was subsequently arrested for violating his probation. From jail, he angrily contacted his girlfriend, Linda Mae Parrish, instructing her that she must take care of things and compel Ada to recant her statement. Parrish enlisted John Willis Nisulke, a mutual friend, for assistance. The pair began actively harassing Ada, breaking into her apartment on multiple occasions and stealing personal belongings in a calculated attempt to intimidate her. This strategy eventually yielded results. Ada informed Bolstad's probation officer that she had fabricated the indecent assault allegations, a retraction Nisulke secretly recorded from an adjacent room. However, on June 5, 1985, Bolstad called Parrish from jail, angrily declaring the recantation was insufficient and he would remain incarcerated. Parrish, present at a party that evening, was overheard relaying this message and urging Bolstad's friends to escalate the situation. She explicitly told partygoers she would pay someone to end Ada's life. Nisulke, along with possibly others, left the gathering shortly after that call, proceeding to kill Ada in her bedroom. 2 decades after Ada Sinfelder's slaying, the investigation reached a critical turning point in 2006. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's Cold Case Unit officially reopened the file. The renewed effort commenced with the public offering of a substantial $$50,000 reward for information. Crucially, technological advancements allowed for the reanalysis of forensic DNA evidence that had been collected from the 1985 crime scene. DNA extracted specifically from cigarette butts discovered inside Ada's residence provided the long-awaited breakthrough. This new genetic evidence led investigators directly to a specific individual, John Willis Nisulke. This concrete scientific link allowed law enforcement to officially connect Nisulke to the scene and ultimately provided the necessary foundation to charge the individuals responsible for Ada's death. On July 3, 2008, a grand jury formally indicted the trio connected to Ada Sinfelder's death. The accused included John Willis Nisulke for the slaying, Linda Mae Parrish for first-degree slaying, which was later reduced to manslaughter, and James Raymond Bolstad. The subsequent trial featured compelling witness testimony that solidified the case. One witness stated they observed Nissulke the very night of the incident with a bloodied hand, which was wrapped tightly in a white towel. This same witness, who resided in Ada's apartment building, further testified that Nissulke knocked on their door that night, requesting a flashlight because he claimed to have lost a knife. Another crucial witness alleged that both Nissulke and Parrish compensated them to assist in cleaning Parrish's apartment using ammonia and bleach on the day Ada's body was discovered. Additional testimony revealed Parrish instructed everyone who attended the party to deny that anyone left early that night. Furthermore, multiple witnesses stated that Nissulke had confessed to them over the years that he killed Ada because she was a snitch. The complex legal proceedings eventually brought resolution to the decades-long case. Linda Mae Parrish reached a plea agreement, pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit first-degree manslaughter, and crucially, she agreed to testify against her co-defendants. Parrish was ultimately released after serving approximately 21 months, credited for the time she had already spent in custody. In July 2009, John Willis Nissulke, despite pleading not guilty, was convicted on 4 felony charges. These included first-degree premeditated slaying, first-degree slaying while witness tampering, and 2 counts of aiding and abetting first-degree slaying. Nissulke received a life sentence, mandating a minimum of 14 years before he would be eligible for parole. James Raymond Bolstad, in December 2009, pleaded guilty to obstructing an investigation. He was sentenced to about 58 months, but secured immediate release, having already served sufficient time while incarcerated on unrelated charges. Finally, the pursuit of justice concluded on March 21, 2024, when the Minnesota Supreme Court denied Nissulke's final appeal, thereby upholding the original verdict.